Hey everyone, and welcome to this Learn with Naitik Explainer. Today, we're going to fundamentally shift the way you think about getting wealthy. We're completely bypassing the complicated spreadsheets, ignoring the confusing stock charts, and instead, we're zooming right in on the actual psychology behind our money choices. We're breaking down chapters 6 through 9 of Morgan Housel's absolutely brilliant insights from the psychology of money. And let me tell you, this is going to completely change your perspective on everything from buying a car to how you save for retirement. So, I want to start things off by asking you a deeply personal question. What if literally everything you thought you knew about getting wealthy was just wrong? In today's modern hustle culture, we are constantly bombarded with these flashy images of success, right? The luxury items, the private jets, the wild lifestyles, we're totally conditioned to want those things. But I want you to challenge that narrative for a second. Are you actually spending your money to build true, lasting wealth, or are you just buying things to look the part? It's a really crucial distinction that trips up millions of people, and we are going to uncover exactly why. All right, to understand why we get this so wrong, let's jump right into Chapter 6, Tails You Win, which explores the math of success. Okay, let's dive into this. We tend to have this bias where we think highly successful companies are just consistently good at every single thing they do. But in reality, massive success is almost always the result of a tiny, tiny percentage of outlier events. In statistics, these are known as tails. Take the incredible story of Walt Disney. We all know Disney today, right? It's this unstoppable multi-billion-dollar entertainment empire. But his early struggles in the business were absolutely brutal. I mean, even after Steamboat Willie put him on the map as an animator, the business side of things was a total mess. His very first studio went bankrupt. His early films were monstrously expensive to produce, financed on just outrageous terms. By the mid-1930s, Walt Disney had produced over 400 cartoons. 400! And guess what? Sure, most of them were beloved by viewers, but financially, the vast majority of them lost an absolute fortune. But then, out of nowhere, came a massive tail event. Out of hundreds and hundreds of hours of film, just 83 minutes changed the entire trajectory of the company. I'm talking about the 1938 release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was an absolute smash hit. It earned $8 million in its first 6 months alone, which was just on a completely different planet compared to anything the company had ever seen. That single, rare outlier event paid off all of the company's crushing debts, let them give retention bonuses to their key employees, and bought them a state-of-the-art studio in Burbank. In pure business terms, those 83 minutes were literally all that mattered. And this brilliantly illustrates how the exact same logic applies directly to the stock market. If you take a look at the Russell 3000 Index, which is a massive, broad collection of public companies, and track it since 1980, the numbers are just staggering. 40% of the companies in that index were complete duds. I mean, they lost 70% or more of their value and just never recovered. Over half of them were just your run-of-the-mill average performers. But somehow the index as a whole still increased 73-fold. Why? Because just 7% of the companies were extreme winners. Those tiny tail events, companies like Apple or Amazon exploding, offset all the massive failures and drove almost all of the market's returns. Which brings us to this beautifully liberating piece of logic. You can literally be wrong half the time and still make an absolute fortune. You do not have to be right all the time to succeed, because these rare tail events drive the vast majority of outcomes in business, in investing, and honestly, even in your career. It just goes to show how much we underestimate how normal it is for a lot of things to just flat out fail. Whether you're picking stocks or leading a business, you might only be right half the time. And you know what? That is perfectly fine. So now that we've covered the mechanics, let's move to Chapter 7, Freedom, the ultimate goal. Because once you know how to acquire money, you have to figure out what it's actually for. To really get to the bottom of that, let's look at a pretty powerful realization from a 1981 study by University of Michigan psychologist Angus Campbell. Now, at a time when psychology was really focused heavily on what brought people down, Campbell wanted to know what actually made people happy. And he found that happiness wasn't cleanly tied to your salary or the square footage of your house or how prestigious your job title was. He concluded this, and it's profound. Having a strong sense of controlling one's life is a more dependable predictor of positive feelings of well-being than any of the objective conditions of life we have considered. Put simply, time is the absolute highest dividend money pays. The absolute greatest intrinsic value of money is its ability to give you independence and autonomy. It's the freedom to wake up and say, I can do whatever I want today with whoever I want for as long as I want. Think about it for a second. Our cars are way faster today, our TVs are razor sharp, but what's happened to our time? We feel busier than ever. By stacking up unspent assets bit by bit, you're essentially buying yourself the freedom to step away from the demands of other people. That flexibility, that is an unseen return on your wealth that is practically incalculable. Now we move on to our third pillar, Chapter 8, which tackles the ego head-on. Morgan Housel calls this the man-in-the-car paradox. He actually developed this theory years ago while he was working as a valet at a luxury hotel in Los Angeles. He was parking Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Rolls-Royces for all these wealthy guests. Naturally, he assumed those cars sent a really strong signal that the driver had made it, that they were incredibly smart, rich, and important. So the crucial point is the massive gap between what the driver thinks and what the onlooker actually thinks. People buy these incredibly expensive cars because they want to signal to the world, wow, look at me, the guy driving this car is so cool. But here is the harsh reality. Onlookers are completely ignoring the driver. When someone sees a Ferrari roll up to a stoplight, they don't admire the person behind the wheel. They bypass the driver entirely and just use the car as a prop to fuel their own fantasies. They're sitting there thinking, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool. The real tragedy here is that people spend a fortune on luxury items to earn admiration, but it almost never works, especially from the people whose respect you actually care about. If your actual goal is to gain respect and admiration from others, you really have to be careful about how you seek it. Because I promise you, you will gain far more genuine respect through humility, kindness, and empathy than you ever will through horsepower and chrome. Which brings us home to Chapter 9, and honestly, the ultimate paradigm shift of this entire explainer, redefining our very understanding of what wealth actually looks like. It's a vital concept to grasp. Wealth is what you don't see. Spending money just to show people how much money you have is quite literally the fastest way to have less money. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the incredibly sharp contrast between being rich and being wealthy, because they are absolutely not the same thing. Being rich simply means having current, highly visible income. It's the guy driving the $100,000 car or living in the massive McMansion. But here's the secret. Even if they're completely drowning in debt, they need a high income just to afford those monthly payments. Richness is loud. It screams for attention. But being wealthy? Wealth is totally hidden. It is unspent assets. It's the savings accounts, the retirement funds, the investment portfolios quietly compounding in the background. It is the nice cars they decided not to purchase and the first-class upgrades they casually decline. You see, there is literally no faster way to feel rich than to blow a ton of money on really nice things. But the only way to actually be wealthy is to not spend the money that you do have. True wealth is simply an option not yet taken to buy something later. It's those financial assets that give you the freedom and control over your time that we were talking about earlier. As a financial advisor once had to bluntly remind the famous singer Rihanna after she overspent, if you spend money on things, you will end up with the things and not the money. It sounds almost too simple, right? But it's a profound truth. Savings is really just the gap between your ego and your income. Which leaves us with this final vital question to evaluate our own financial lives. Ask yourself, right now, are you spending your money to actually be wealthy? Or are you just spending it to look rich? The hardest part about wealth being hidden is that it's really tough to find good role models because all we ever see is the loud richness around us. But it takes massive, massive restraint to hide your success in savings accounts rather than wearing it on your wrist for everyone to see. Just remember, that restraint is the only thing that actually buys you your freedom. Thank you so much for tuning into this explainer. Take a hard look at your spending, keep your ego in check, and go build some true unseen wealth. Catch you next time.